And just like that, we are live. How about that? All
Yay.
right. Yeah. So we're just chatting backstage about just different podcasts and live streams and what you normally talk about versus what we talk about on this one. And so I sensed some nerves, but I assured Dustin this is going to be probably the easiest, most friendly interview you'll ever do. So yeah. So with that, welcome to the Channel CEO podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really genuinely excited to be here. Really and truly.
Awesome. So we're just again chatting backstage, kind of get to know you a little bit. And as I was mentioning, I was just up in Baltimore, or as we say around here, Balmer, um,
Yep.
up your way yesterday. I guess with that is set up some of the backdrop. I guess why don't you give us a quick primer about where you're from? Are you a Mainlander or what are your roots? Let's start there.
I'm from here. I'm one of those people that was from here and never left here. I went to college right down the road at American University in Washington, D.C. I could never break free of the pull of this area. So,
Yeah,
yep, I'm from here, dyed in the wool.
good deal. So I guess let's get even more localized since maybe I'm more familiar with the area than maybe some of the ones that are tuning in. But I guess where specifically, what part of Baltimore or Maryland or do you originate from, hail from?
North Baltimore, the burbs, Hunt Valley, Towson kind of area, went to, for those who aren't familiar with the area, something like half of the kids in this area go to private schools. And so I was one of those private school brats with a lacrosse stick in hand at all times. That's the world I came from.
So I have to ask which school was that because I did attend one of those schools for a year up in the Baltimore area.
Oh,
The,
really?
the,
So
the
I went to St. Paul's all the way through. I now live a stone's throw from it. So there you go.
Oh, very good. So it was a Gale at one point up at Mount St. Joe.
Oh,
Uh,
excellent.
yeah, so I had a brief stint there, but many years ago. And this is not about me. This is about you. So, well, cool. So Baltimore native, and then spent time over at American
Yeah.
University.
I was just far enough away from home that I was in a new place. I was in DC. I was in the middle of everything. I had a lot of friends that would go to great schools like Virginia Tech, wonderful school. It's in the middle of nowhere. I wanted to be able to have a million things to do at night while still getting my education, and also having a reasonably quick drive in case I wanted to go home and see my family and get laundry done and things like that. So I balanced all of that pretty well with DC. I love DC. Still have a ton of friends there. Stole my wife from Northern Virginia and fooled her into coming to move here with me. So yeah, love this entire corridor.
Awesome. And so, what was the degree of choice, or what was the area that you studied at American?
Well, you have to pick between computer science or information systems. And for those who don't know, the information systems can mean different things at different places, but it basically means where I went half business courses, half computer science courses. So I didn't get as deep into programming, at least not in college, as the computer science kids, but it meant I had more time to go out Friday, Saturday nights. But I got to take a lot of wonderful business courses, and that blend still serves me well to this day with what we do. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So it's funny. There was a theme for a little while on the podcast. I think a couple of maybe it was like 3 or 4 of the interviews in a row. It felt like we had this critical mass from like Brooklyn and the Bronx. As we talked about the Brooklyn hustle, the Bronx hustle, and you know I think Baltimore has its own kind of version of a hustle. So I guess take me through the formative years. I mean, growing up, any particular jobs or kind of summer hobbies, things that you did to pass the time?
There was, my first job out of school was, even when I was in school, when I was 18 and got my first internship, it was doing this, doing the sort of technology consulting that I still do. In fact, on Wednesday, 2 days ago, I met with a client of ours. It's a big school system here in Baltimore. And I walked through the front door, and the guy who's the head, he's been there for 30 years, and he said, "I remember you." you installed my printer 20 years ago. And I was like, I did install your printer 20 years ago because I
Wow.
interned at an MSP that was acquired by a really large MSP in Maryland. And now I'm still friends with them to this day. And they recommended us, and I got to walk through the doors. So I'm still doing what I always did. But that hustle is real. I had a lot of friends whose families that came from family owned businesses, and they felt a lot of pressure to meet the mark, be able to contribute to those businesses. My parents were entrepreneurs. I wanted nothing to do with their businesses at all, but I wanted to find my own way. But I still saw how hard they worked, how rewarding it was for them, and I absolutely wanted to try to reach that same bar. And now, to the extent I can, pay it forward, to my kids. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Just out of curiosity, what kind of businesses were they involved in?
My mom owned a pretty sizable mortgage servicing company
Mm.
in the Baltimore area for quite a few years called Financial Security Consultants. And my father was is still a great financial planner. And everyone in my family, from my wife, who's a CPA, my father is a financial planner. My mom was in the banking and mortgage industry. My sister was also a financial planner. And so again, my wife being a CPA, I'm just surrounded by money people. And here I am, the computer person. I'm not totally sure my family totally understands what we do, what I do here. But I love having them because I can, from like when I would have some savings, I'd be like, Dad, even in my 20s, make this money more money. And I don't know how they do it, but I'm glad that they're there. Got people I can trust to advise me on such things.
Hey, look, it's great pedigree of people to surround yourself with. Not only see
Yeah.
the hustle, again, the entrepreneur hustle, and we'll kind of get to we'll fast forward in a couple moments, but you're seeing that hustle, and then surrounding yourself with folks that are pretty good with money is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and to be clear, there were times when we were sat down. There's not going to be that many gifts this year for Christmas, and times that were really good. So I got to see some of those roller coaster rides, and my parents were great at smoothing those out, because their paychecks weren't steady necessarily. They were dependent on how the market did and how mortgage rates were and things like that. And they worked really hard to make us not feel it, but through doing so, they showed us how they were smoothing them out. And I've taken a lot of that to our business. I'm sort of building custom software. I'm sort of in the construction industry and have been doing it long enough to know how to smooth out those rough edges and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So you'd mentioned that one of the first jobs, or maybe job after school, was working at an MSP. Right? That's
Yep.
I think what's great, and it's another theme that we love to pull on, especially as we do these monthly pitch events, and just on this platform in general. But a lot of the CEOs that have pitched or been a part of the platform are former MSPs or spent time at an MSP, so they understand both sides of the marketplace. So I guess take me back to kind of the first day working at MSP. Was it everything you thought it was going to be? Was it what I'm get myself into? And take me through that journey.
I had no idea. It was my first job. You know what I mean? I never. Maintain I would have been a better person if I had had jobs outside of the industry for perspective, but I never did. I always wanted to be involved in software, in IT, and computers from a very young age. So I didn't know what that even meant working at MSP. Neither did they. That term didn't exist in 1998. You know what I mean? But they were a virtual IT department. That's what they called themselves. Your virtual IT department. And the company's name was ATSG, Advanced Technology Support Group. And I just got to go to these businesses and play with tech that I love. But the other thing that I didn't realize at the time is I fell in love about learning how other businesses work. And to this day, that's my driver. Um, Through doing that, seeing how all these different businesses operate in all sorts of different sectors and verticals, I get a better perspective, a better understanding of how the world works in general. So within the first 2 months, I was hooked on the problem solving from the technical perspective and doing all the work on the technical side. And then what really kept me coming back was learning about the businesses. And so through that, I knew this was all I would ever do, from early on. And I was fortunate to have some great people at that first MSP that I worked at that recognized my strengths, were quick to point out my weaknesses and beat them out of me as fast as they could. So I got a leg up really early on from those folks. I'll always be grateful.
So how much of that fascination with seeing businesses and understanding different business models and types, how much do you attribute it to to the fact that your parents were entrepreneurs? You think that was you think watching your parents as you grew up, you think that was your kind of your early version of an MBA, and then you fast forward, you're looking at these different businesses and you're fascinated by how they operate.
It definitely didn't hurt. That's for sure. It's a great question. Yeah, my father would talk about the stock market and say like, and then this business influences this business, and the entire economy, is almost like a living organism. He would give me those, these talks and try to explain to me how everything influences everything else, and that really stuck with me growing up. And to this day, I love going to my kids. We once worked with a company that wraps buses. You know what I mean? Like puts the
Sure.
design around a bus, like that. And my kids were on the street and they saw this new bus go by and they said, "Wow, Daddy, look at that. I wonder what that costs." And I was like, $682. Because I know the company that did it and what it costs to do that. And I was like, it takes about 3 hours, and here's how they do it. And I love knowing how all of these various things, fit together. So yeah, it absolutely came from there.
That's awesome. It sounds like your kids are starting to get the bug as well. If they're thinking about,
I hope
how much
so.
it costs. I mean, that's again, that's impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
that's definitely there's different ways to pay it forward, but if you're paying it down and the kids are paying attention, then you know that's awesome. Because look, I try, and I guess I have to back off, quite often because I try to get my kids to understand business and what we do, and I get the glazed look off more often than not. But I'm still holding hope that they ask. But well done, well done.
Thank you.
So the company I knew of that you worked at for a while, up in the Baltimore area. Maybe there's a gap between Might Machines and getting there. But so I guess what happened after that MSP? Was there a leap to Might Machines, or was there another stop or other stops along the way?
There were stops, but there was it was always almost always in the same ilk. After I left there, I always my degree. I knew I wanted to be a software developer, and there were opportunities where I worked at ATSG to do some software development, but they were not a true software development shop. It was an offshoot. I needed to be with a bigger staff of developers, so I went on to Aberdeen Proving Grounds,
Mm,
and got to work with on the federal side of things for a bit. And that was a wild trip. I was fortunate to work with some truly great architects that instead of me saying I'm self-taught, they broke me down after my first 1 or 2 years of development and taught me how to develop software correctly. And on the base, we were sort of told, "Hey, go talk to that general over there and go get the requirements and then build the software. And if you do a bad job, this won't work out." And there were a lot of people that came and went, but I got to be a true consultant. I got to talk to my clients who didn't often know what they wanted themselves. I got to build prototypes and iterate. I got to do every aspect, just running around that base and building stuff for the various people on it. That was really, really wonderful. And then, I had sort of built all the various things after a year or two that that one needs on a base like that. And so I wanted to expand beyond it. It was the same problem sets. And so then I got back into commercial consulting and worked for a firm with a good reputation in the area called the SIBA Group. And they were a cold fusion shop, a Java shop, and I was their first Microsoft hire. I was a .NET guy, and they all made fun of me for being a .NET guy. I slowly but surely I was like, listen, .NET, the Microsoft side of development, it's going to be a thing. And sure enough, slowly over time, I started to take those cold fusion developers and bring them over to the dark side, right? And teach them how to develop with what I thought was a better class of technologies. And 5, 6 years later, that company was acquired by Mind Over Machines, and me with it. And that's how I got to Mind Over Machines. And started out as a developer in the pit, became an architect there. I was an architect at the last place as well. And then one day the owner pulled me into his office with the guy who ran the company as well and said, "Hey, Rick's going on vacation for a month to Hawaii. While he's gone, we want you to run the show." And I hid under the desk. I was like, "Kevin, absolutely not. This is a big mistake. This is a big staff. I'm just a developer. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just for a few weeks, Dustin. It'll be fine. It'll be fine." And it was fine, and I actually had a blast doing it. And then after those 3 or 4 weeks, they pulled me back in. I said, "Welcome back, Rick." And he said, "Yeah, about that. I've taken another job somewhere else. This was a test to see if you can hack it. And the job is yours. I'm moving on to bigger, better things." And he did, and I still keep in touch with him. And the job was mine, and that's how I got to where I was over there. It was pretty wild, and I had a lot to learn very quickly about leading and delegating and managing. Some of those lessons I'm still working hard to refine and hone. But yeah, that's how I got to Mind Over Machines.
As we all are. So you spent
Yeah.
a good bit there, and then I guess the next stop after Mind and Machines is or was or is.
To this place, yeah, Incite
Mhm.
Automation. That's
Yeah,
it. So that was my next stop.
yeah,
You know, you take a job that you thrive, you're successful in, a place you worked for well over 6 years, and then another six at Siva, who bought them. So all my friends were still there. So a place I worked for 12 years and was thriving and succeeding, and then to get up and walk away. That's a thing. And you wonder how much of it is midlife crisis versus how much. 'Cause I was just on the cusp there versus how much of it is no. I see the industry changing, and I think there's an opportunity here, and I want to be a part of it. And I didn't know how much of a mix it would be. I didn't know, Kevin, if I'd be teaching, SharePoint to 2 3 man shops the rest of my life after I left, from going from a much larger shop to this. But it's worked out amazingly, wonderfully, in a whole bunch of ways. So
yeah.
yeah.
So again, you have this entrepreneurship pedigree. It's in the family. You've spent time in kind of building the career, and then you're kind of given the keys to
Yep.
run an organization, and you had from what I understand, a pretty good job. Pretty great team, and then you take the
Yeah.
step off the ledge, and as you point out, right, you don't know, what day one looks like, let alone 4 or 5 years from day one. So I guess what was that process like? I mean, what was it? Sleepless nights? Is it still sleepless nights? Is it all exciting and you're just ready to tackle the world?
It has always been sleepless nights,
Yeah.
but it was in the beginning. I was terrified. To this day, it's sleepless nights. But the good news is, what I'm losing sleep over constantly evolves, constantly changes. Partly because as time has gone on, you know, some of the concerns that I initially had, yeah, I got that sale, but that was a lucky once in a lifetime thing. That'll never happen. Hello? You know what I mean? That happens to me so often that at this point I'm like, no, like it's not luck anymore. We're doing a great job. Our name has gotten out there. We're getting great referrals from our referral partners. We're knocking out of the park. Like this is not a bump. This is not a one-time thing that we got this huge name-dropping national account again and again and again. It'll keep happening. But that used to keep me up at night. When you get your first really big win, then you're terrified because once it's over, then what do? You know what I'm like? Now I have to get 3 more giant ones. I
Mhm.
was worried about that, but then it evolved into our processes, into growing in people. It's always changing. I'm sure you're going through the same with the immense success that you have had and channel has had in general. But I love the fact that the problems that are keeping me up at night are always evolving, always changing, and they are newer and better problems every single time. So there you
Right.
go.
Right. So you're continuing your theme, of your fascination with different businesses, working with different businesses, and rolling up your sleeves. And so, take me through kind of a typical, I guess, customer engagement today. Like, when you're working with a group, what problems are you guys trying to solve, and what are typically the outcomes from the engagements?
Well, what I love is that it's never typical.
Mhm.
That's why I love what I do. We work in just about every vertical where we're very buttoned up and focused is the technologies that we use to solve the problems that we solve. In a given day, I'll talk to between 6 to 10 different organizations. Um, One of them will be a big national nonprofit or an association, and we'll be building a system to manage their association management, grant management, timekeeping, invoices, accounting. We build systems that run organizations end to end because they can't find something off the shelf that works. That'll be that. Usually I have one of those calls in a day. We're doing like a big ERP like system. Those are my favorite things to do. Then I'll have two SharePoint Teams calls. I'm a well-known SharePoint Teams expert. I've built some of the largest SharePoint implementations in the country. I've been working with it since 1998, back when it was Microsoft Site Server. So that goes all the way back to the beginning of my career working in SharePoint, and I've done some really big implementations. I get a lot of calls around those from MSPs, with questions about how to set it up for a particular client. And I strengthen my relationship with them. Then I'll move on to, who knows, a national sports team working on their Power BI reports or something like that. That's something that we have done and continue to do. We've worked with casinos and how to optimize things on the gaming floor and how to pull data from 10 different systems. That's what I love about this job, the variability of it. I'm working with small shops. I'm working with our MSP partners, answering questions for them. I get to work with other consulting firms, helping them with best practices. It's just every call is something completely different, but also all within the realm of our expertise. What a great day to have, a day that's different every single time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it keeps it fresh, keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
Um, so speaking to the MSP audience, right?
Mhm.
And I often ask questions like forward looking questions, but I guess we'll get to forward looking and what insight looks like in a couple years from now. But you know, today, right? You're working with an MSP, or just providing guidance or advice. I mean, what kind of advice would you give to an MSP that's looking, to scale their business, looking at the future and where they need to maybe put their chips down on the table? Going back to that casino reference, but where do they put their chips on the table, and what do they need to be investing in moving forward?
I am still consistently surprised at how many first conversations I have with MSPs that are still on the fence about, how much should I go into Microsoft 365 and Office 365 and the cloud in general. Some of them built up their own private clouds or are doing a lot of virtualization, and they're having trouble letting that world go. Meanwhile, the longer that they wait, the more advancement is happening in SaaS products in the cloud, and they're missing it. And that hill is going to get tougher and tougher to climb. I see this chasm forming of sort of the haves and have-nots, and that's first half of it. The other half of it is I see some MSPs. Okay, there's a big opportunity on the SaaS side, on the software side of things for us to capitalize on, and they try to do it themselves. We learned how to do SWANs 2 years ago, so now we'll just learn the Power Platform. We'll learn Power Automate or Salesforce or something like that. Not realizing, as I learned when I ran a different company, that you need different people, different processes, a different approach than an MSP would typically take with upgrading infrastructure. How you build a software solution for a company is very different. It requires a lot more expectation setting, a staff with sort of a different mindset, not better or worse, just different. Um, and so I've seen them go it alone, and we do a lot of, I wouldn't call them rescue missions, that might be too far, but stop them in the middle. They come to us for a gut check when I wish they had come in earlier. I've got other MSPs that we're managing those engagements for them, and they're taking notes. They're watching how we do it, and then they start taking it after they learn from the experts. So the other big piece to your question is, maybe, think twice about trying to jump into a wholly new area like software development all by yourself on day one. You might hurt your relationships with some of your existing clients. Partner with somebody or bring on some staff that are experienced in it, before you jump into that world. But for me, that's where the biggest, I'm biased, of course, but I think that's where the biggest opportunity lies. MSPs are the trusted IT advisors. As more and more moves to SaaS and to products in the cloud, you're going to be expected to know that information. So start learning, either independently or by talking to experts like us, or partnering with experts like us. That's my advice.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you're at that intersection, right? Of there's the knowledge gap. There's, for most MSPs, it's to focus on their core business, and then you're layering in these kind of ancillary, capabilities, solutions. But it's also offset by just a general lack of staff, right? General lack of
Yeah.
knowledge, and ability to recruit people, fast enough to keep up with projects and build a practice. And so, I guess, do you see a lot of that? Do you see a lot of the market coming to you because just the subject matter expertise and the time it would take to bring people on versus just working with you guys directly?
Yeah, and after we do it for a bit, absolutely, that's insightful. They ask me, where do you find these people? Where, how did you do it? We've talked to all the recruiters, and my answer is always the same. We don't find them. I can't either. We make them.
Mm.
We have a series of tests that we do that are proprietary to us, a way of interviewing to gauge, is that person wired for this style of work, and then we train them in the technologies. We make them ourselves. Essentially, we got so good at it. We actually have a sister company called Incite Discovery that is a boot camp that trains people in these technologies, and we turn that around to MSPs as well. But yeah, that's another part of the reason why these MSPs come to us, is that it's hard enough to find techs. Try finding software developers that, with a very iterative style of development like this, that can also be the business analyst, that can also gather requirements from a client. Back in my day, it was enough. Oh man, I said back in my day. Just take a drink every time I do that. Oh, I feel old, Kevin. It was enough for me to sit in a hoodie and code all day. People would hand me specs, and it was great. This style of development is so fast.
Yeah.
You have to be able to look somebody in the eye and talk and understand their business, and then go away and do it. The work is so quick now. There's no prototyping. Like, the prototyping takes just as long as to build as the software itself. These tools are so amazing. So it requires a very unique skill set. But those out there with the desire and the soft skills, they've got a very bright future ahead.
Yeah,
On this front.
yeah.
Sure.
It's to your point. I mean, it's fascinating. Anytime you're dealing with a product, any type of dev, right? Most people are used to, or most organizations use the stovepipe. You have a PM, PO, front end, back end, DevOps, and it's very stovepipe. And I'm sure there's an element of that. But to your point, like the type of people that you're working with, because they are both customer facing and they're going back and part of the solution. That's a different. You're hiring for a different breed at that point.
Yeah, and funnily enough, it's more like an MSP would hire.
Mhm.
When you're building for a software development team, which is my background, that's secondary to their technological skill set.
Yeah.
But MSPs, most of their staff is forward facing to their clients, so soft skills have always been important to them. What's new to the software side of things, to my industry, is needing that here. We're not used to it. So I was actually cribbing notes from them for quite some time. And so when I'm helping an MSP learn up how to best advise their clients on licensing, or SharePoint, or Power Automate, or Power BI, or Power Apps, whatever it might be, they're folks, I'm always amazed consistently, have the soft skills and understand the business needs and things like that. It's just the technical side they need help on, which often, more times than not, that's the easier side to teach. I can't teach somebody soft skills, not effectively. Still figuring it out myself. But the tech, the tech is simple.
Yeah. So I said we'd be forward looking. So I guess this is where we look into the future, right? And what does
Yeah.
Insight look like in 3 to 5 years? What's Insight in your industry in particular? What's it look like?
Well, our office looks amazing because we just bought an office building right on the water. Very exciting on Boston Street.
Wow,
So yeah, we
congrats!
have our own building. It's very, very cool.
Wow.
And I'll finally have room for more pinball machines. Thank goodness. There's not enough in here
I was gonna
already.
say you definitely have the coolest backdrop. You probably have the coolest office today, but expanding that on the waterfront sounds even cooler.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have a space. I'm in our offices now, and we are bursting at the seams. That's why I sit in our lobby. That's where I am. I'm in the lobby right now.
Wow.
And I expect us to. When I started this business, I expected to stay in the Mid Atlantic corridor. We started in 2018, so it was 4 years, 2 months now, but who's counting? And I was expected to be in Northern Virginia to Philly. Like that was the area, just where I could drive. That was it. That's all we were going to do. A year later, COVID hits. Now we're national. I deal with more clients on the West Coast than some days than I do on the East Coast, and Central and everything in between. I didn't expect that. So 3 to 5 years, because we're starting to run these boot camps and things now, I'm expecting to have just as much staff virtual as I do in the building. You know what I mean? And we love to collaborate. I'm excited to learn how to make that work. Since we've gone national in a big way with our clients, I want to start going national with our staff. And by that point, some of the products that we have in the pipeline, both for the channel and for industries where we've seen a need, a lot of those will be well on their way. Some of which, knock on wood, will be hits at that point. That's a factor of the type of development we do that's often overlooked. It's really easy to take something that you build for your organization. We did work for a lumber yard, and we found out that what we built was the best lumber system in the industry. You know what I mean? There aren't any good lumber management systems. I asked the guy when I met with him first, how do you maintain your inventory? And he pointed at a golf cart. And I said, why are you pointing at a golf cart? He said, well, when somebody calls and says, do you have, so-and-so lumber? I say, hold on. And we put the phone down and I get in the golf cart and I drive up and down until I can find enough. And then 10 minutes later, I get back on the phone, and that's how he did it. And I said, there's got to be software for this, to maintain inventory. And there was, but it was all written in the, early 90s. And so we built a system using these platforms that people already own up to 65. And now we're turning around and selling it as a product, with them, in partnership with them. So I expect to see a lot more of that as the years go on. I really believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, just like people will ask you, do you have Android or iPhone? People are going to say, are you Salesforce or Dynamics? Power Apps or Salesforce, something like that. And then businesses of all shapes and sizes, they're going to go on to the Microsoft Store, Salesforce's store, and download the modules they need. And we expect to be a big part of that. When we've built reports that go toe to toe with BrightGauge, but give MSPs an ability to put their own spin, their own secret sauce onto those reports and things like that. So I see some productization happening, us getting a more national footprint while still also basking in our lovely new office space. That's where I think the future will head.
That's awesome. But in fact, you said BrightGauge. I know a lot of MSPs were devastated when they had sold. And now reserve. I'm not supposed to have a comment or bias, but I think there's definitely room in the market for another solution.
There's room. The
Yeah.
trick is that there's consolidation happening,
Mhm.
and sort of less options but strong options. But at the same time, whenever I talk to an MSP, one of the biggest things I ask about what's your pain, it's differentiation. Everybody wants to stand out, show what makes them unique, why they should be considered. But the tool sets, sort of, hamstring you more and more into doing things a certain way. And it's hard to break out and do anything new and innovative and different. I feel like can push the channel forward. And so a lot of the organizations we work with some really big MSPs. We work with 3 of the 10 largest in the nation, and many, many mid-sized ones and many, many small ones. And all of them at all sizes are looking for differentiation. and we can use these tools to get there. So, my message to them is often, sure, use Bright Gauge, but what are you going to give in your QBR that makes you you? You know what I mean? What are you going to do? Everybody's got Bright Gauge. What do you have that sets you apart? And then I collaborate with them and try to give them that unique thing of it. Their way of looking at their numbers, their way of recording a ticket, their way of pricing, their pricer or quote or whatever. We can use what you already own to imbue back that secret sauce that gets you ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge. Yeah. Well, look, I told you this is going to be an easy one. You're all nervous coming, behind the scenes. No, look, in all seriousness, I mean, I love what you guys are doing. I think the industry needs it. To your point, I think we're at a point where, as the MSPs mature and they realize that, the technology is moving that much faster that they have to look at what you guys do to help augment and help them grow. I mean, I think part of it's an efficiency, but to your point, it's differentiation and growth, and that starts with process, right? It starts with how structured you are on the back end and how positioned you are for growth. And I think you guys just do a phenomenal job in getting MSPs there. So
Oh, thank you.
kudos to you. And the fact that you're Maryland based is always that certainly helps as well.
Soft spot in your heart, I know.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, and again, with perspective, that's what's great about being from this area. It's the North and the South. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We can go to the beach and we can go skiing as well. Is it the best skiing? Absolutely not. But but we can go. We can do everything in one place. I love having that perspective. So
that's right. That's right.
I'd rather be.
Awesome. Well, look, Dustin, thank you so much for joining me this week, and
Thank you.
everybody tuning in. This will obviously be out on all the podcast apps, and actually, I think starting next week, Kayla on my team is going to start producing this weekly newsletter. We have a channel CEO newsletter, and so be on the lookout for that. Yeah, so this should be some good content and just overall recognition for this industry. So great stuff. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
You got it.